بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وقل ربي زدني علما ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. وصلي اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, in the Qa'idah, that's number 7, he says, حكم التابع كحكم المتبوع فيما تبعه فيه وإن كان المتبوع أفضل وقد كان أهل الصفة فقراء في أول أمرهم حتى كانوا يعرفون بأضياف الله ثم كان منهم الغني والأمير والمتسبب والفقير لكنهم شكروا عليها حين وجدت كما صبروا عليها حين فقدت فلم يخرجهم الوجدان عما وصفهم مولاهم به من أنهم يدعونه بالغداة والعشي يريدون وجهه كما أنه لم يمدحوا بالفقدان بل بإرادة وجه الملك الديان وذلك غير مقيد بفقر ولا غنى وبحسبه فلا يختص التصوف بفقر ولا غنى إذا كان صاحبه يريد وجه الله فافهم. So he says the category of a follower or the ruling of the follower is the ruling of what's followed. So you judge the follower based on what he's following. فيما تبعه فيه, concerning that thing that he's following. وإن كان المتبوع أفضل, even though what's being followed is better than the one following it because we're following the Prophet ﷺ. He's the matbu'. So the mafdul, the less virtuous follows the more virtuous. That's why they're following it. But it has the hukm, so it's a nisbah. It has a relationship to it. وقد كان أهل الصفة فقراء. And the people of Sufa, which is one of the derivations according to some of the scholars, they were the Sufiya, and then it became Sufiya, like the Darija. They were poor people in the beginning of their affair, to the point or to the degree with which they were known as the guests of God. And then later, there was among them wealthy people and even governors. Abu Huraira became a governor, Salman al-Farisi. Abu Huraira became very wealthy. وَالْمُتَسَبِّبُ وَالْفَقِيرُ, and they also had people that were earning their livelihoods, and then there were the indigent that weren't. But they all were grateful when they had things, and they were patient when they didn't. So that was their station. And that the wijdan, when they had things, that did not remove them from the description that they were given by their Lord. Because he described them not with their poverty, but by the fact that they called on their Lord in the morning and the evening. That's the description he gave them. So even though they were poor at the outset, that did not, once they gained wealth, it did not remove them from that status. Nor were they praised for their poverty. It's not something that Allah said. He declares all of us impoverished before him. Antum al-fuqara. All of us are faqir in reality. So he did not praise the fiqdan. بل بإرادة وجه الملك الديان. No, what he praised was their desire, their yearning for the sovereign, our Lord. وذلك غير مقيد بفقر ولا غنى. And that's not restricted to poverty or wealth. وبحسبه فلا يختص التصوف. Based on that, then tasawwuf is not limited or specific to either poverty or wealth, but rather its possessor is the one that desires the countenance of God. اختلاف النسب قد يكون لاختلاف الحقائق وقد يكون لاختلاف المراتب في الحقيقة الواحدة. فقيل إن التصوف والفقر والملامة والتقريب من الأول، وقيل من الثاني وهو الصحيح، وعلى أن الصوفي هو العامل في تصفية وقته عما سوى الحق، فإذا أسقط ما سوى الحق من يده فهو الفقير، والملامتي منهما هو الذي لا يظهر خيرا ولا يضمر شرا، كأصحاب الحرف والأسباب ونحوهم من أهل الطريق. والمقرب من كملت أحواله فكان بربه لربه وليس له سوى الحق إخبار ولا مع غير الله قرار فافهم. So he says that the differences in ascriptions or attributions are based on the differences in realities. So sometimes it's because of differences in their stations in the same reality. So you can have nisbatuhu, or his relationship to one thing, that we're talking about the same thing, but this person has a different relationship to it than this person. So you look at them, they don't look like the same thing. And he says that could be for two reasons. One is because their realities differ. Or two, it's because the degrees differ in the same reality. And he said, and concerning tasawwuf, it's the second one, right? Or it's the first one, rather. When you look in the tasawwuf, it's said that tasawwuf and poverty and blameworthiness and also proximity are from the first. Those are all different haqa'iq, different realities of people that have attribution to this art. And then he said, وَقِيلَ مِنَ الثَّانِي وَهُوَ صَحِيح. But then it said, no, they're from the second, which is differences in their degrees. It's the same reality, but they have different degrees. So in logic and in philosophy, they make a distinction between kind and degree. نوع والدرجة. Like, for instance, men and women are of the same kind. We're equal in kind, different in degree. And when we get into comprehension and extension, it's one of the problems that people have when they speak, because if they studied logic, they wouldn't have these problems. But when you say men are stronger than women, you're talking about the comprehension of men and not the extension. Because the extension covers all men. And that's not true for all men. But in comprehension, when we think of a man, we think of that which is stronger than the woman, right? Taller, stronger, able to leap tall buildings with a single bound. So, but there are many women that are smarter, taller, stronger than many men. So it's not, but the degree is different. And this is why if you play golf, they have the ladies' tees and they have the men's tees. Men don't play with women in most sports, although we're starting to move into an era because of enhancements and drugs and I mean, really, and I think there are women that are going to be challenging these things as we're seeing them do it in high school. There's women now playing high school football and things like that. So things are changing in that way in the West. But generally, that's not the case. So that's what he's talking about, differences in degree, not in kind. So the kind is the same. It's one reality, tasawwuf, but it has different degrees. Like poverty. Some of the Sufis are poor, some aren't. Or malamatiyah. Some are malamatiyah, some aren't. The malamatiyah, and the ulama differed on them. Most of the ulama oppose it as a concept. The malamatiyah were people that, what he said, يُظْهِرُ شَرَّ وَلَا يُضْمِرُهُ وَيُضْمِرُ خَيْرًا. That they manifest the opposite of what their inward reality is. So the malamatiyah would be people like, they would be people like, there were certain Sufis that used to wear rags purposefully, and it was actually part of their discipline. So they would also have to beg. Like in Buddhism, they make the monks have to go out and beg. It's to break their ego. One of my close friends, Mauritanian, told me in the Eastern Province, when they finish memorizing the Quran, they make them go beg, which is very hard because they're very proud people, Mauritanians. But they would make them go beg in the tents. They would have to go with a bowl, and they would beg. And it was to break their egos, because once you memorize the Quran, you might think, hey, I'm really something. So it was a way of reminding them that we're all dependents. That's a Malamati tradition. And some people would say that that's not permissible. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-mu'minu la yudhillu nafsah." The mu'min doesn't humiliate himself. But ad-darurat tabih al-mahdhurat. Necessities permit the impermissible. The way they looked at it was, you're not going to get into paradise if you have an atom's weight of pride in your heart. And if I feel pride in my heart, I'm going to do whatever I can to get out of it, because we're talking about salvation now. So this was the approach that they took. Sidi Ali al-Jamal in Morocco is a good example of that, of somebody who was a minister, and when he took suluk, his teacher made him sit on a garbage dump in Fez. And people knew him as a minister before, and it's just they thought he went mad. But it was to break his nafs. Ibn Ajiba, who's one of the great scholars of Islam, and in the later period, really one of the giants, has a very famous tafsir, al-Bahr al-Madid. Ibn Ajiba had to beg. His teacher made him beg. And this is a man who was a alim and in Tatwan, and he made him beg at the masjid where he had been the imam. And the ulama, they criticized him to no end. But he had the pride of the scholars. And what his teacher was doing was he was breaking that pride. And what's interesting is all those ulama that were passing him by, nobody reads their books anymore. Nobody knows who they were. But people know who Ibn Ajiba was. So I'm not condoning the practice, but I'm just saying it has been a practice in the Islamic tradition in the past, the Malamatiyya. And I know one sheikh in Morocco, very, very distinguished grammarian. He used to tell the raunchiest jokes. And it used to really shock me. You know, I couldn't get, and he was an older guy too. I mean, he said once that somebody actually asked him the hukm of being intimate with the lights on. And he said, if she looks like my wife, then you should turn the lights off. You know, I mean, really outrageous stuff. And one day I just said to him, I got you. You're Malamatiyya. And right when I said that, man, he just... You know, he just lowered his head. And I actually regretted it, you know, just saying it, but I really... It's interesting, man. So those are the Malamatiyya. So he's talking about those people. And then the Taqrib are the people in close proximity to God. وقيل من الثاني وهو صحيح. So he says, وعلى الصوفي وهو العامل في تصفية وقته عما سوى الحق. The Sufi is the one who is engaged in purifying his time. What an interesting idiom. Purifying his time. Because you are essentially your time. What we do with our lives defines who we are. It's our habits, it's our dispositions, all of that. We're in-time creatures. And so using time in the best way, which is the purest way, is what the Sufi is engaged in. Purifying it of anything other than what's true. Imam Malik was asked about chess, and he said, "Al-min al-haqqi huwa?" Is it something from the haqq? And he said, and the man said, "No." And he said, "Wahal ba'd al-haqq illa batil?" Is it, what's after haqq other than just empty things? And the fuqaha, like I wrote an article on this about chess. They permitted, from time to time, engaging in that. But Imam Malik was at a whole other level, and the people who are sitting and studying with him at another level. They're the people that are preoccupied with their time, of utilizing their time in the best way, and the preciousness of time. So that's what he's talking about. فَإِذَا أَسْقَطَ مَا سِوَى الْحَقِّ مِنْ يَدِهِ فَهُوَ الْفَقِيرُ. If he removes from his hand everything other than the truth, then he's a faqir. That's a faqir, because he doesn't possess anything. وَالْمَلَامَةِ مِنْهُمَا. So the malamati is the one who's preoccupied with purifying his time, but also with removing everything other than the truth from his hand. So he says, هو الذي يظهر خيرا لا يظهر خيرا. He doesn't show good. ولا يضمر شرا. And he doesn't hide badness, foulness. كأصحاب الحرف. Some of the people, the professional people, the people, craftsmen, because craftsmen are often known in the marketplaces. There a lot, especially in Morocco where he was from. The craftsmen were often in guilds, and they were they were engaged in tasawwuf. And so in the souk, they would be like souqi. You would think they were just some bazaari person, somebody in the bazaar. وَالْأَسْبَابُ وَنَحْوِهِمْ مِنْ أَهْلِ الطَّرِيقِ. وَالْمُقَرَّبُ, and the one who's the muqarrabun, أُولَٰئِكَ الْمُقَرَّبُونَ. The muqarrab is the highest. مَنْ كَمُلَتْ أَحْوَالُهُ. He's the one who his states are perfected, human perfection. فَكَانَ بِرَبِّهِ لِرَبِّهِ. He was through his Lord for his Lord. لَيْسَ لَهُ سِوَى الْحَقِّ إِخْبَارٌ. He has nothing other than the truth to inform you about. وَلَا مَعَ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ قَرَارٌ. And he has no place except with his Lord. So now, Bismillah. In the introduction here, he says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قال الشيخ الإمام أفضل المتأخرين قدوة الحكماء الرازخين أثير الدين الأبهري طيب الله الثراء وجعل الجنة مثواه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمد الله على توفيقه ونسأله هداية طريقه ونصلي على سيدنا محمد وعلى عترته أجمعين. أما بعد، فهذه رسالة في المنطق أوردنا فيها ما يجب استحضارها لمن يبتدئ في شيء من العلوم مستعينا بالله إنه مفيض الخير والجود. So he's saying here that the Sheikh, the Imam Athiruddin al-Abhari, who was one of the scholars, he was a Hanafi scholar, and he's a 13th century scholar, contemporary and in the area of Fakhruddin al-Razi and others. He died in 1263 and lived in Iraq and Central Asia. He wrote a lot in what are called the aqliyat, and he was also a falaki of some note. So he was an astronomer. And then he says, may Allah purify the earth that has his body, وَجَعَلَ الْجَنَّةَ مَثْوَى, and make paradise his final abode. And then he says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The Prophet said, كُلُّ شَيْءٍ ذِي أَمْرٍ وَذِي بَادٍ لَا يُبْدَأُ بِبِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ فَهُوَ أَبْتَرُ أو أقطع أو أجذام. So anything that is momentous or important and it doesn't begin with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and in a riwayah bi Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, then it's cut off. And they say it's cut off from the barakah of it, the blessing that comes from it. So he's beginning Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and this is ibtida idafi, not haqiqi, because it begins قال الشيخ الإمام above. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, nahmadullaha ala tawfiqihi, I praise Allah because of this tawfiq, ala tawfiqihi. Praise can be because of attributes, because of things that are done. There are different reasons why we praise. So here he's praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he has gifted us with tawfiq. And tawfiq is the opposite of khidlan. Tawfiq is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enables you to do what is pleasing to Allah. That's tawfiq. If Allah enables you through your free will to do what is displeasing to Him, then it's khidlan. So we ask Allah for tawfiq. It's one of the things that Muslims ask Allah, that we do the right thing, because we're accountable for our actions and we have free will. We believe that we have free will, that we can act according to our irada, our will, irrespective of what, even though most argue determinism when you get into scientists, and even if they argue that even before your thoughts there are neurological events or hormonal events that precede your thoughts themselves. You know, there's these arguments that these happen. That all of that is irrelevant, because Allah is the one enabling you. The istita'a is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So He's the enabler, and He knows what you're going to do, and He will, if He gives you the ability to do a good thing, then it's His tawfiq. If He gives you the ability to do a bad thing, then it's that He has withheld that tawfiq. And then he says, وَنَسْأَلُهُ هِدَايَةَ طَرِيقِهِ, and we ask Him for guidance on His path. And the path is, tariq is just the path. In technical vocabulary, the sharia is the outward path and the tariqah is the inward path. So you have the suluk al-zahiri and the suluk al-batini. The suluk al-zahiri is the fiqh, and the suluk al-batini is the tasawwuf, the tasfiyah, purifying the heart. And then obviously you have what's called the haqiqah. So traditionally they talked about the sharia, the tariqah, and the haqiqah, which is the arrival through the two. You need the two, the inward and the outward road. وَنُصَلِّ عَلَى سَيِّدِنَا مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. A lot of the earlier books don't use Sayyidina. It's more of a later edition. You will find in the earliest editions of Imam Jazuli's Dalail al-Khairat, there's no Sayyidina, but the later Jazuli put Sayyidina in it. So in all the places where it's read with Sayyidina. The Prophet ﷺ, there's a hadith where somebody said Sayyidina, and he said, Bal Sayyidukum Allah, your Sayyid is Allah. That's a Sayyid al-Mutlaq, the absolute Sayyid. But the Sada that are relative here on the earth, just like you can use Rabb for an absolute meaning, Rabbul Alameen, and you can also say Rabbul Mal, Rabbul Bayt, Ana Rabbul Bayt. So that's a relative meaning. And the same is true for Sayyid. The Quran calls Yahya Sayyid, and the Prophet ﷺ said about Mu'adh ibn Jabal, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, Qumu li Sayyidikum, get up for your Sayyid. The Sada are the so if you ever hear anybody say that, it's not proper to say that. It's not true. وَعَلَى عِتْرَتِهِ أَجْمَعِينَ. And the itra are his family, and that's based on two hadiths. The hadith in the Muwatta on the recession of Yahya bin Yahya al-Laythi, the Prophet ﷺ said, was reported to have said, تَرَكْتُ فِيكُمْ أَمْرَيْن مَا تَمَسَكْتُمْ بِهِمَا لَن تَضِلُّوا مِنْ بَعْدِي كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَالسُّنَّةِ. But in a absolutely sound riwayah, he also said, كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَعِتْرَتِ. And the much blessing is in the family. أما بعد. And then this is called فصل الخطاب. It's how the Arabs move to proceed, is how it's sometimes translated. Literally it means as for what's after. فهذه رسالة في المنطق. This is an epistle. It's a short treatise on logic. Al-Mantiq is categorically logic in English, meaning the art of logic. And then he says that we have placed therein all of which must be immediately accessible. In other words, you have to be able to تستحضره. You have what's called ready at hand. Present at hand is whatever you're doing. Like if I'm writing something, then it's present at hand, my ability to write. But if I know how to write, it's ready at hand. So I can write when I want. Like if I'm driving a car, that act of driving is present at hand. I'm doing it at the time. If I have the ability to drive a car, it's ready at hand. So what he's saying is that you should be able, this should be ready at hand for you to draw on these meanings. لِمَنْ يَبْتَدِئُ فِي شَيْءٍ مِنَ الْعُلُومِ. And this is for anyone who's going to begin to study something from the sciences. And the sciences here means the ulum, from the Latin sense of it, scientia, to know. So it's knowledge. So science is not, in the modern English, we use science to specifically mean a certain type of knowledge, scientific knowledge. Now we have the hard sciences, the soft sciences, so social sciences. But that's a closer meaning. The idea of science is not differentiating between hard and soft. Anything that is something that can be known and it's been codified, organized, then it's called a science. So science is organized knowledge, because you can have disorganized knowledge. You can know a lot of facts about different things, but it's not organized. That's a type of knowledge, but it's not a science. A science is organized knowledge. So he's saying, if you're going to study any organized form of knowledge, then it's necessary for you to know these things. So I'm going to give you the basic things that you need to know before you go in to that science. And then he says, اللفظ الدال بالوضع يدل على تمام ما وضع له بالمطابقة وعلى جزئه بالتضمن إن كان له جزء وعلى ما يلازمه في الذهن بالالتزام. This, he really starts in a place that in Western logic, in studying traditional logic, they don't usually start here. He doesn't really go into understanding the wujud al-dhihni, which is really important. But what he's talking about here is a lafz al-dal, is an articulated term. It's something that indicates something else. It has a dalala, or a signification. And bil-wad'i means that it was posited for that meaning. على تمام ما وضع له بالمطابقة. So if it corresponds with the thing that it is defining specifically, then it's by mutabaqa, it's by correspondence. So when I say horse is lafz dal. It's It's an articulation, it's a vocable, it's something that I express. So it is a verbal expression that corresponds perfectly with what occurs to your mind if you know the English language and you know what horse means in English. So I say horse, and all of you have an idea of a horse. Now, if you actually close your eyes and imagine that horse, then you have a phantasm. You have the surah, the form of the horse in your mind. And that's different from the idea of the horse. And this is one of the real, in Enlightenment philosophy, this was one of the major mistakes that was made. And that was not differentiating between the mental image and the idea. And Locke does not differentiate. Berkeley, the empiricists, this will go. And it causes a lot of problems because they basically, what they argue is that meaning does not exist without language. Whereas we don't actually believe that. We believe that meaning pre-exists language. Al-ma'ani qabla al-mabani. Meanings before al-ma'na qabla al-mabna. So this is one of the most important things for you to get because there's a lot resting on this, a lot more than you might think. These are really important concepts because the modern madness, a lot of it has to do with a denial of knowledge. Skepticism is the norm. There's an acceptance of scientific knowledge, inductive knowledge, but it's still with skepticism. And even though you have philosophically poorly trained scientists that believe in their materialistic knowledge, when you get into Western philosophy today, and I don't advise any of you do that, but when you get into it, what you will find is they really don't believe in knowledge anymore. They don't believe that knowledge is actually something that we can have with any certainty. Skepticism is the dominant mode in Western tradition now. And some of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century were profound skeptics. Wittgenstein, who's probably one of the most brilliant philosophers of the 20th century, pretty much gave up talking. Just thought it was a waste of time. Because he considered them language games that didn't really lead to any truths. The Muslim belief is that the world is knowable. In fact, the Arabic word for world is what? Alam. And Allah is Rabbul Alameen. Alam in Arabic is what they call ismu ala. The fa'al wazn is called, it's a type of, it's a noun of instrument. So you have tabi' is something you make an imprint with. Khatam is something you make a seal with. And alam is the instrument of knowledge. So the alam is what you know. And so our belief is that all knowledge comes initially from the world, but we have a very special and unique gift that has been given to us that enables another type of knowledge to occur, so that our knowledge is not merely perceptual. Now what happens in the West, and it begins with Descartes, but it goes to Locke, and then Hobbes, Locke, Hume, and it ends up with Kant. And after Kant, there's really a major shift. I mean, Kant, in many ways, knowledge is very different after Kant in philosophy. And he called it his Copernican revolution, his great discovery. And his discovery was that reality is not informing us, that we are informing reality. And this is very much a postmodern articulation when they say things like seeing is not believing, believing is seeing. You know, it's an inversion. And this is one of the signs of the end of time, is what's called qalb al-haqa'iq, which is the inversion of realities. And this is mentioned in all of our books, that in the end of time, order is turned upside down. So the child orders the parent around, and not vice versa. The worst people are the people in power. They're there for self-service, not for benevolence or to rule. They're there to rule for themselves. So here's what I want you to understand from this. The first thing that enables us to know anything is called a simple apprehension, tasawwur, at-tasawwur as-sadij. And it's simple because it's immediate. It's grasped immediately. There's no mediation. There's no discursive thought that's needed. When you see an apple, you just grasp what it is. That's a simple apprehension. And it's simple because there's also no judgment on it. You're not making a judgment. So when you see something and you have a tasawwur of it, that's your apprehension of it. Now, when you see it physically, as I'm looking at that cup, I have a perception of the cup. That's called a percept. So I'm perceiving the cup. When I turn away and I say, can you see that cup? I'm not perceiving the cup, I'm conceiving the cup. So the concept is in the mind. The percept involves the mind and the material object that you're seeing, because you have to have this perception of it. Now, what you're doing is the most significant thing that you will ever do in your life. That very act is the single most significant act that a human being does. And we take it completely for granted. And we have no idea what we're actually doing. But what we're doing is so sophisticated and so complicated. And no computer can do this. No animal that we know of can do what we're doing. And the angels don't do it. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ, He said to the angels, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قَالُوا, they said, أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيُسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. You know, are you going to put in the earth the one يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيُسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ, and he sheds blood, he sows corruption and sheds blood? They were doing they had known the jinn before. So one group that had free will were put on the earth, made a mess of it. And so the angels said, is this the same thing? And نحن نقدس لك, we're praising you, we're glorifying you, we're making you holy. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, I know what you don't know. Well, what did Allah know that they didn't know? وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ, He taught Adam all of the names. كُلَّهَا ثُمَّ عَرَضَهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ, and then He showed the names, hum, عَرَضَهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ. فقال أنبئوني بأسماء هؤلاء إن كنتم صادقين. Tell me the names of these things if you're being truthful about what you said. You know, why are you putting this one there? It wasn't i'tirad, it was istifham. And so they قالوا سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا. We don't have any knowledge except what you have given us. They're programmed in that way. يَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. They do just what they've been programmed to do. يَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. And then, right, he said to Adam, Ya Adamu, anbi'uhum, right, بِأَسْمَائِهِمْ. So tell them their name. فَلَمَّا أَنْبَأَهُمْ, right? When he told them, Allah says, didn't I tell you? قَالَ أَلَمْ أَقُلْ لَكُمْ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ غَيْبَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. I know the unseen. There's something that's unseen happening in the abstraction. Because what's happening is immaterial. It's not of the material world. And this is why thought, in our understanding, is not material. It's immaterial. And this is why this is the refutation of the materialists who argue that there's nothing but materiality. There's nothing but the concrete world. No, there's the abstract world. There is another world that is immaterial. It's a spiritual world. And thought is from that world. And so this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is what he gave Adam. And this is Fakhruddin al-Razi says, the name, the ism, is from either wasama, which is a sign, so it's a signification. What's the significance of this thing? Or it's from sama yasmu, which is high or exalted. And if you look in Surah Ar-Rum, when Allah talks about the difference of the al-sina and the alwan, right? He in the science of balagha, he puts the tongues in an tibaq form in rhetoric. He puts the tongues with the heavens, and he puts the alwan, the complexions, with the earth. So the complexion is from your body, but the tongue, your language, is from somewhere else. You see, and this is why when you study kalam, and this is only in a teaching situation do you say this. You don't say this in any other place. And it's even, you're not even supposed to repeat it to students, like go out and tell people this. But when they talk about kalam Allah, because Allah kallam Allahu Musa taklima, Allah spoke with Musa, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Aisha radiyallahu anha, ma bayna daffatay al-mushaf kalam Allah. What's between the two covers of the mushaf, right, is kalam Allah. Now that kalam is, according to our tradition, this is the soundest opinion because it gets out of a lot of problems. If you don't take this opinion, you have very serious metaphysical problems. And you end up basically asserting the same thing that the Christians asserted, which is the idea that God can come into the world in his attribute, the attribute of his logos, that it could come into the world in the incarnation. And this is why Montgomery Watt argues that the Muslims we have incarnation, they have imbibliation. In our tradition, God became flesh. In their tradition, he became book. So if you take a literal understanding of that, you have that problem. But out of adab, we call the mushaf kalam Allah, and it is kalam Allah. And anyone who says it's not kalam Allah is a kafir. But one of the early debates was, is the kalam makhluq or is it ghayru makhluq? Is it eternal, an eternal attribute? Because it's an attribute of God. It's a sifa. And the sifa is not an accident, because accidents are not necessary. Only the essence is necessary. Allah's attributes are necessary to his being. So he doesn't have accidents. He only has attributes. And so what they said, and this is what Imam al-Maqari, and there are many variations of this, but he says, إنما كلامه القديم ما فيه تأخير ولا تقديم نعم ولا لحن ولا إعراب أو كل أو بعض أو اضطراب إذ كلها إلى الحدوث انتسب ككون علمه على مكتسبة. This is what he says in إضاءة الدجنة. That when we talk, إنما كلامه, his speech, القديم, the uncreated speech, ما فيه تأخير ولا تقديم. There's not syntax in it. نعم, indeed. ولا لحن. It's not articulated. ولا إعراب. It doesn't have إعراب. أو كل أو بعض, or part or whole. You can't take something out of it, and because it's an infinite attribute of Allah. You can't. So, because all of that goes to huduth, created things. Those are all attributes of created things, and his kalam is not created. So it's the uncreated. What they're talking about is this thing that we're talking about. It's the ma'ani. So the ma'ani, when we say kalam Allah, it's the ma'ani, not the alfaz, not the mabani. Even though we don't deny the mabani are kalam Allah, but not the eternal kalam Allah, because the mabani are written, they're spoken, you speak them with sound waves are created. The book comes into the world, not as an uncreated thing, because then it would be an attribute of God that's coming into the world, and that's exactly what the Christians say. So that understanding is very important in terms of abstraction. What you are doing. Now, this is the essence of our understanding. All of understanding is based on this. You cannot have understanding without the ability to do this. So when I see something, what am I seeing? What am I seeing when I see that thing? If you understand it, if you get a tasawwur of it, you're seeing its essence. And what is its essence? Its essence is the oneness in its multiplicity. And this is why I can call any glass a glass, because it's a universal, one out of many. In other words, what you're doing is you're tuwahidu. You are unifying the concept. It's tawheed. And you're doing it all the time because that's what you were created to do. You were created to see one in many, one in multiplicity. That's what the human is created to do. And this is Abu al-Atahiyya says, وَيَعَجِبًا كَيْفَ يَعْصَى الْإِلَهُ أَمْ كَيْفَ يَجْحَدُهُ الْجَاحِدُ وَلِلَّهِ فِي كُلِّ تَحْرِيكَةٍ وَتَسْكِينَةٍ فِي الْوَرَى شَاهِدُ وَفِي كُلِّ شَيْءٍ لَهُ آيَةٌ تَدُلُّ عَلَى أَنَّهُ الْوَاحِدُ. That how wondrous that anybody could disobey Allah. How strange it is that anybody could disobey Allah. وَعَجِبًا كَيْفَ يُجْحَدُ كَيْفَ يُعْصَى الْإِلَهُ أَمْ كَيْفَ يَجْحَدُهُ الْجَاحِدُ. Or how could an atheist deny him? And God has in everything that's moving and every still thing, everything that's moving and every still thing in creation, a testimony, a shahid. And what's the shahid saying? Ana wahidun. In every single thing in existence, there is a witness saying, I'm one. That glass is saying, I'm one. And when you understand me, you understand I'm one. Even though I have many, many particulars, you have grasped my universal essence. And that's why you can apply that essence to any particular. And so, the oneness, that ability to pull that oneness out is abstraction. Tajreed. It's istikhraj al-kulli min al-juz'i. It's taking the universal out of the particular. And that's how we communicate. Now, there are a group that says that doesn't happen. It's impossible. It's rubbish. And they're called nominalists. They say there's only names. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran about those who worship idols without reality, without essences. مَا هِيَ إِلَّا أَسْمَاءٌ. They're only names. سَمَّيْتُمُوهَا أَنْتُمْ وَآبَاؤُكُمْ. They're only names. You named them. They have no real meaning. So what he's saying is, when you speak about real things, there's the name and then there's something else. And then he says, سَبِّحْ اسْمِ رَبِّكَ. Glorify the name of your Lord, because the name of your Lord is not just a nominal phenomenon. The name of your Lord indicates the essence of your Lord. And the essence of our Lord for us is existence, because that's what's knowable about his essence. That's what we can know. And in that way, he's not unknown. And so we define him by wajib al-wujud. He is the necessarily existent. So that is what human beings are. It's an amazing thing. It's an incredible thing to be able to do that with everything, and that's how we communicate. I saw a man yesterday. How do you know what a man is? Because you have the universal concept of the one in the many. And that's why when you look at a dog, what does a dachshund have to do with a Great Dane? Seriously, or a Chihuahua? What does a Chihuahua have to do with a Great Dane? The size is not important. They share the same essence, which is that they have dogginess. That's what it is. It's dogginess. That's what we call the abstraction. We use like words that end with S, happiness, dogginess, or ty, beauty, humanity. These are all talking about abstractions. Nominalists deny their existence. They say they don't exist. Conceptualists it's a nominalism light. They say that we'll accept that it has a kind of mental existence, but it's not real. And so nominalists will argue that there's no universals. The Kantian version of it is that our mind just tricks us into lumping you all together. But the reality of it is you're all just separate little entities that have nothing to do with each other. It's just the mind plays a trick on you. And this is the same argument that Dawkins used about evolution, the selfish gene. That all these things, it's all a trick. There's not really design out there. If you really understood it, you'd understand that it's all randomness. It just looks like design. I mean, these are their arguments, and this is the aqeedah shaitan. Just because what does shaitan do when he sees Adam? What does he say? What does he say when he sees Adam? Like he's told to bow down. Why won't he bow down? He's made out of water and earth. He couldn't see the essence. He's a nominalist. Shaitan is the first nominalist, and it's his creed. He couldn't see the essence. All he could see was the material form. He could not see the immaterial reality, which is articulated in thought and understanding. That he couldn't see it. And that's why these people are trapped in a diabolical philosophy that doesn't enable them, it doesn't allow them to open up to understanding. The scholastics, they said, we understand to believe, and we believe to understand. سَأَصْرِفُ عَنْ آيَاتِي الَّذِينَ يَتَكَبَّرُونَ. Allah, I will remove my signs from arrogant people. And anybody, at least be agnostic and say, I don't know, but there's no God. Your imaginary friend. It's going to be interesting because we're actually going to see them, according to the Quran, going into hell. And because they used to, وَإِذَا مَرُّوا بِهِمْ يَتَغَامَزُونَ. When the believers go by, they're all nudging and look at those idiots. أَنُؤْمِنُ كَمَا يُؤْمِنُ السُّفَهَاءُ. Do we believe like fools believe? It's the same stuff. They say the exact same stuff. They're not even original. No, seriously, they always do the same things. They make fun of believers. And I'm talking about, these people like Bill Maher,
like simple people. They make fun of Mormons and Buddhists and Hindus and, anybody that has a devotional practice, don't make fun of them. Don't curse the idols of those calling on other than Allah. Don't curse them. Those people, they're expressing their understanding of devotion, but they're trying to worship something. And the Muslim job is supposed to elevate them to worship the highest thing, the only thing worthy of worship. But these people are worshiping their genitals, their stomachs, their bank accounts, their clothes, their cars. I mean, nothing. Empty people, the hollow men, vacuous people. They eat and drink for a little while and then they're gone. And laugh on. Come, let us mock at the great that had such burdens on the mind and toiled so hard and late to leave some monument behind. Come, let us mock at the good that fancied goodness might be gay and sick of solitude might proclaim a holiday. Come, let us mock at the wise with all those calendars whereon they fix old aching eyes. They never saw how seasons run and now but gape at the sun. Mock mockers after that would not lift a hand maybe to help good, wise, or great, to bar that foul storm out of cynicism and nihilism, to bar that foul storm out. For we traffic in mockery. These are the mustahzi'un. Kafaynak al-mustahzi'in. Suffice me the mustahzi'un. Let me deal with the mockers. Don't deal with them. Don't answer them. Don't respond to them. Let them laugh. Let them mock. Mock on. Mock on. Really, mock on. We're all going to find out. It's either all black or some people are in big trouble. Right? It's one or the other. Either something's going to happen after we leave this body. And for me, there's so many indications that it's true and real. And I mean, if you're a believer and are open to it, you'll see it all the time. The signs are all there. Winston Churchill said, most people will stumble onto the truth once or twice in their life, but they'll get up, brush themselves off, and carry on. That's called kufr. Alhamdulillah. Any questions? Any answers? Yeah.
So you talked about the recognition of the essence. What is the Muslim differentiation between what we understand of the essence and abstraction and what Plato's forms were?
Excellent question. I've got a really good group this year. So you guys are just asking the right questions. Plato believed that it was impossible for us to be doing this if we didn't have some knowledge of it prior to this world. Because he said it's just such a complex event that's occurring when we do that. So he said there must be original source forms that we saw in another place, and we're remembering them. So he believed that there were the archaei, or the archetypes, and they were in this perfect world. So there was the perfect circle and the perfect triangle. It was all there. And we saw all these things. And Ibn Arabi was of the opinion that he called them the a'yan al-thabita. And this is what Adam was shown. And because Adam was shown these things, this is where the recognition comes from. So he would probably be closer to a Platonic understanding of that. And I think Imam al-Ghazali would, but not all the scholars would agree with that, obviously. So, but Aristotle took the position of what's called moderate realism. And this is, I think, the position of the majority of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is closer to moderate realism. That they have a wujud dhihni, but not a wujud khariji. So they do have an existence, but it's an immaterial existence in our understanding. They don't have an actual existence outside of our understanding. Is that clear? Yeah.
So there's a region of the brain that's responsible for recognizing and assigning names. So sometimes when people have strokes, they won't be able to give names to objects.
Right. Like
So-
the Broca's
Yeah,
area.
the Broca's area and
Right.
even beyond
Uh-huh.
it. So how exactly do you explain that in regards to abstraction?
Yeah, and that's, this is something that our scholars talked about, because like Abu Hanifa said that consciousness resides in the brain, because he noted that when people got hit sometimes in the head, they would lose the ability to speak. So that was his kind of istidlal. The other three, Imam Malik and Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad, said it's in the heart, because Allah says, لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهِ. And so they differentiate between the muldihat, like a dia of the head and the heart. Like you have two dia if you hit the head and knock them out. So it's an interesting kind of fiqh problem. But what that indicates is that we're not Cartesian, because Descartes had a problem with the ideas. He considered that the ideas were completely separate, and we actually see that that we don't have a dualism like that. That the body is resurrected. That our consciousness is, the body is part of our consciousness, and so it's the instrument that carries the consciousness. But the consciousness is immaterial. But it's still it's necessary for that while we're here. I mean, obviously, when our bodies die, the consciousness continues on, right? But there's another type of body, the ethereal body. So, and that's why we don't really consider like what they call brain dead or vegetative life. Most of our ulama don't permit the euthanasia, because they believe that the soul is still, there's a type of consciousness there. And we know that people that have been in comas sometimes came out being aware of things that had happened around them. That does happen. So that's the best I can do. I mean, it's... from what poem did you quote when talking about mocking others? That's Yeats, and it's from a poem. It's a section of a very long poem called Easter 1916 from William Butler Yeats, great Irish poet.
Assalamu alaikum. You mentioned the word phantasm.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the Greek word for it.
okay, I'm assuming it's spelled PH, right?
It's PH.
Okay,
yeah.
and you talked about the concept of a horse, and then the idea we get in our mind is
that we differentiate between the phantasm and the idea.
yeah.
So the idea is this is something that is not, it's immaterial, the idea.
Yeah.
The phantasm is a representation.
We only have a phantasm of something we're aware of.
It's a really good question, because it's a problem, and the argument that Locke and others make is that you can't have a real concept of, you have to imagine a triangle. Do you see? You always have to, and it'll be, you'll always have to imagine it in some way. You can never imagine it as that pure, undifferentiated reality, which is the idea. But our scholars differentiated between the idea and the image, and that's when you get into the wujud al-dhihni. That's where they differentiate between that, because the wujudat are four. When you have kalam, like kalam, if you study grammar, they have al-kalam, like Ibn Jarrum says, lafdun murakkabun mufidun bil wad'i. He's talking about a dalala al-wad'iyya, which is what he's talking about here. He's talking about the oral term. The oral term is not the kalam which عند اللغويين, right? So عند المتكلمين, the kalam is the ma'na. إن الكلام لفي الفؤاد وجعل اللسان على الفؤاد دليلا. Right? That's the verse that they use, that the kalam is in the heart. It's in consciousness. And the tongue it's a tarjuman, it's a translator of the heart. And that's why people say, I don't have words to tell you how I'm feeling. Well, there's something that, you just can't express it. But there are meanings there. They're not just feelings. They're meanings, but you can't articulate them. And that's why we love poets, because poets say things that we can't say ourselves. Right? I mean, they say these things, and when you hear it, it's like, wow. I mean, that's why people love like Rumi, Maulana Rumi, because they read things and he's articulating a universal. The poet he's universal in that way because he speaks across time and place. Rumi is a universal human being. He speaks to everybody that reads him, if they're open to those meanings. I mean, some people, poetry, what a load of rubbish, waste of time. There's people like that. The Arabs say, "Ma عندك ذوق." I mean, Indians, if they hear poetry, it's like, mukarrar, right? They get affected. Mauritanians, it's a gut feeling. Like, they're like, They literally do that, it's like, boom, you just took my breath away. It's like, that's how they get affected by meaning. See, the ibra in Arabic, ibra, i'tibar. See, abbara means to express. The ibara is the expression. The ibra is the lesson, what's discerned. Ma'bara is a bridge because it's taking you through words to meanings. It's taking you, the mabani take you to the ma'ani, but they're not the same. And when you have that, fa'tabiru ya ulil abasar. What kind of basar? It's the basira. It's the inner eye. فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ. And that's why the abra is the tears, because when you get the ibra, the abra start flowing. The meanings can be so powerful that it brings tears to your eyes. And that's an expression of, it's overflowing. You're overflowing. You're filling up with meaning, and it has to come out in the form of those tears. How does the realm of the jinn world affect our theories of logic? I mean, they have the same rules. They just have certain, they can shape shift, and they can, they can get into people as well. So you can have a type jinn possession and things, and they can, they're invisible, so they can be, and you don't see them, but they see you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead. Okay. Do our names, Faisal, Khalid, have a metaphysical reality, or are they just labels? No, names are very important. The Prophet said, give good names, because names have a reality. And there's traditionally there was a science of naming people. So, some people still know how to do that. But names are really important. I mean, the Prophet's name was given in a dream. So, his name, Muhammad, I mean, if that's not evidence that names have meaning, what does? So, and I always ask people, what's the meaning of your name? And a lot of people don't know what their name, but you should know what your name means. Because some people say, I don't think it means anything. Unless, there's certain names like that they use now in modern, and they've proven that those people are destined, in Freakonomics, they talk about how people that are given these meaningless names it's almost like a death sentence in terms of their upward mobility in a society. I mean, you should name them after great people or beautiful things. Like, look at the Muslim names, they're so beautiful. Hindu names even, Chinese names. I mean, I ask people their names. Hindus always have amazing names. Like, their names always mean something really interesting. Buddhist names mean something. Christian names, they name them after John the Baptist, and those have meanings in Hebrew. Aaron, Harun, it has a meaning. Musa, it has a meaning. Isa, they all have meanings. The names are very important.
Just wait for the mic. Wait.
What's that?
Sorry. Is phantasm is translated to huam or something like that?
No, I mean, yeah, it would be in Arabic, but it's the surah. It's the surah it's the image, imago. It's the surah that you have in your mind. Phantasm is a Greek word for image. Yeah, now it's used like something fantastic or phantasmagorical. But that's what he meant by it. He just meant an image, imago. It's like a ghost image. It's the remnant of the perception. But it's different from the idea of the thing. Because the idea doesn't have the image. It's the grasping the essence, which is why when you see a Chihuahua, you can still call it a dog, and when you see the Great Dane, you can call it a dog because what you've grasped is not the image. It's not the surah, it's the tasawwur. Do you see? Tasawwarta in a way that it's a conceptualization of it. It's not the actual image, it's the essence. And when we get into definitions, I think it'll be clear because the tasawwur, the simple apprehension, moves to a term, and then the term moves to a definition. So we give a term for something, and then we define it. And you have dictionary definitions. You have different types of definitions. You have descriptions, material definitions, and then you have what's called a real definition, al-hadd al-haqiqi. You have a deficient definition, hadd al-naqis. There's different types of definition. Any other questions?
My question was, can a two-way process be understood in relation to the fitra, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught Adam the names, so like the specificity of the creation, which is like the names, as in like maybe not the essences, and when someone has ihsan, it necessarily comes back out from a spiritual place, but it necessarily comes out into the material world again. So it's like by fitra, we're like externalizing what was put into Adam.
Well, you have to have the sensory experience of these things. Because, we don't know a horse until we see it and perceive it. Because there's people that go to countries and they've never seen that thing before, like a fruit that you've never seen before, and you're like, what is that? Oh, we call that kiwi. But once you see it, the next time you see a kiwi, oh, that's a kiwi. How did you do that? That's the abstraction. And that's the seeing the one in the many. You've got the essence of whatever it is. It's got fuzzy little things, it's green. Those are attributes of it, but those attributes are essential to it, so they're properties of it. right? Because you can have those long kiwis, that's more of an accident. Whereas the property, it's got to have that hairy, and then when you cut it, it's the green, lime green, and those kind of white strips through it. Those are properties that without that, I mean, you could have things that are freakish, or you can have things that are standard deviations, right? Like you can have, this is another thing. See, the modern people deny essences. So they deny, in moral and political thought, one of the problems that arise from that is human nature. They deny the essence, that there's any essence. So that there's no essence to a male. But for us, there is an essence to a male. And the essence to a male is that it is by fitra attracted to a female and vice versa. So when the nature becomes deviated, something else happens. And so they say, oh, well, you have, things, these are in nature. You can't say it's not natural. No, but if you understand what human nature is, it's not natural for the human nature. In the same way that you have an infertile person who's not able to have, again, that's the difference between comprehension and extension. So once you comprehend what a human being is, you understand that's one of the properties of a human being is that they're able to procreate. But if a person doesn't have that ability, it's in the same way that we were talking about the brain. If they lose that ability, there's something wrong with the instrument of procreation. But they have that potential there. It's just not actualized in that particular. And that's why marriage, even if it's childless, it's still a moral commitment. See, there's people that are arguing now that marriage can be between a man and a man. That's an argument. That's not the marriage of this tradition, right? This tradition says, no, marriage is a moral bond. In our tradition, it's a moral bond. It's not it doesn't have the same type of force that it has in Christianity, because Christianity, in traditional Christianity, I mean, Protestantism changes, but in traditional Christianity, you can't get a divorce. Marriages can be annulled, but that's another thing. That's like a khula. But in traditional Christianity, you can't get a divorce because it's actually they consider it a sacred bond, whereas for us it's a moral bond that has sacred components, obviously, but the actual bond, the mithaq, is more of a moral transaction that's closer to a business transaction in that you can get out of it. But you should honor the contract while you're in it. And if it comes to a disengagement, you want to break the contract. Like in a company, you don't cheat them, you don't steal everything and embezzle and run off. Well, the same in marriage. Tasrihum bi ihsan. You leave them with ihsan, right? Does that make sense? Alhamdulillah. Is that it? Subhanakallah. Oh, go. Okay.
In the very beginning it said immediately accessible in one's mind.
Yeah.
Does that mean it's natural to us? It's in our fitra?
Yeah, absolutely. It's in our fitrah, and we obviously recognize it. Now, whether those are innate ideas or the abstraction comes out of the sensory perception, and that's a gift, it's a divine gift, they differ on that. I'm not going to, like I said, Ibn Arabi argues for a'yan thabita, that there are these fixed essences and that we know them. And this is what Adam alayhi salam saw. And so when we see them, there's a type of remembrance. That's one view. The other is that it's the perception of it creates the that there's a correspondence between what we're perceiving in our mind. In other words, the world is conformable to our cognition, right? What modern, the Kantian and Humean, all these later philosophers, what they argue is that it's the mind that's projecting reality onto the world. The world is not informing us of what reality is. Whereas our tradition, we believe it's a fitra thing. Allahumma arini al-ashya kama hiya. Show me things as they are. Right? Show me things as they are. So it's a very counterintuitive approach, but it's really seized the modern world. In terms of people that are thinking about this stuff, I mean, obviously, most people are thinking about the price of tomatoes. But the people that think about this stuff have really fallen into some very serious pitfalls as far as our tradition's concerned. Last one, yeah.
I was on the topic of fitra. Can we say then if someone isn't able to discern that sense of essence, do they have a corrupted fitra? And if they do, is that on them? Is that technically their fault for having corrupted fitra?
Yeah, they might not. People might not grasp it, but if they're sane and they're rational, they're abstracting. They might have a difficult, because these are abstract concepts. So they might have a difficulty understanding it, but they're still doing it. And if they can, the real purpose of it is to abstract the real one from all of this multiplicity. It's to see what is the ground of being? What's the essence of this thing that we call al-kawn? What is its essence? And its essence is the reality of the one that's sustaining it.
Yeah, I mean,
because it can't exist without God.
My question is that, I mean, you kind of see from talking to people sometimes that they don't really, I don't want to say they don't have the capacity,
Well,
but they
there's
just...
people that Allah describes them as summun bukmun umyun, fahum la yubsirun. They're blind, deaf, and dumb. And the thing about, I think it's a perfect description because Helen Keller, if you read that story that I told you about the other day, that's what she couldn't do. And she was blind, deaf, and dumb. And when she got it, the abstraction, a light went off. She was enlightened. And so there are people that are blind, deaf, and dumb for whatever reasons. Like, I don't know why they are. I don't know. I mean, that's just, we don't have access to that knowledge of why there are kuffar. Allahu a'lam. You know, we don't know why people, you know, things are so clear to you or me and they're not clear to somebody else. And we see that with mathematics. Some people, they just get it. You know, I've got a couple of my sons, man, I'm like, explain that again? You know, and I had my 6-year-old was like running rings around me. So they just have that gift, you know. They get it really quick, and they got it at school. You know, my oldest boy, math was just, it's like he just remembered it. So my mother told me that about her experience of geometry was she just knew it. She didn't need to study it. When she was in high school, she just knew it. And that's definitely a Socratic argument. I mean, Socrates is arguing that in the Meno and some of the other dialogues. So, and we know that we're remembering. We're here to remember. So we do have some prior knowledge. I mean, we've been in another world. A lot of us have seen each other in that other world. Because the Prophet said, Al-arwahu junudun mujannada. The souls are regimented in like army regimentation. So you have souls that you're in the same regiment, you know, and that's why you have that affinity. You like those people because you were with them in that primordial world. And so you remember that in a subconscious way. And some people you just have no affinity at all with. It's like, just, get out of here. So the concept happens within. It's in your understanding. Yeah. The percept is the interaction between your intellect and the material thing. So when you're perceiving something, it's through your five senses. So if you smell a smell, like if you have like perfume, somebody comes into the room who's wearing perfume, you smell that, you're perceiving that through your sense, the five senses, through that sense of smell. When you remember the fragrance, that's the concept.
So you have to have the apprehension first, and then the conception.
Yeah, the perception precedes the conception. Yep. And that's why inna sam'a wal basara wal fu'ada kullu ulaika kana anhu mas'ula. Or inna sam'a wal basara wal fu'ada or wal af'ida قليلا ما تشكرون. وجعلنا لكم السمع والبصر والفؤاد. We gave you hearing, sight, and understanding. Fu'ad is from fa'ida, to benefit from your hearing and your seeing. And the benefit is to abstract and to learn. And that's why concrete nouns in grammar, we call them concrete nouns, right? You have concrete and abstract nouns, like liberty is an abstract noun, but Zayd is a concrete noun. They're both in logic considered abstract. Yeah, that's the sequence. Because the hearing, hearing, it just comes even from behind you. Like you hear before you see. And hearing will also avert your gaze, make you look at something. It's perception, yeah. And then there's inward hearing and inward seeing. So, إذا قرئ القرآن فاستمعوا له وأنصتوا. Istima' is to internalize the hearing. That's why it's used in a reflexive. It's a mutawa' in sarf. So, تسمع القرآن is just to physically hear it. But يستمع إليه is to internalize the hearing. Huh? Insat is with tadabbur. Yeah. Go reflect on it.
I think that's all the time we have for tonight.
Okay.
Inshallah.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت